evening, Americans. This is your favorite alien and Bubba here in the evening of Wednesday, March 31st, 2021. Sitting in for Paul Harvey this evening. Stand by for the rest of the story. Well, we the people is something that you guys have heard all the time, right? And everything you say, we the people, you think Constitution. That seems to be a document that most of you have heard about a lot. And a lot of you use the one thing, I take the fifth. But as Mr. Harvey would have told you, there is another document that holds a lot more value than the Constitution. And you guys have relegated to obscurity in this century. You probably couldn't say a thing about that document. Because it starts with, in the course of human events, and that's how it starts. And Mr. Harvey lamented through most of his lifetime that you Americans forgot about that. In the course of human events. That's how it started. And it went through a lot of many drafts, like 5 or so on there. It was finally ratified on July 4th, 1776. Yes. It's the Constitution. But no, you guys are wrong. It's not the Constitution. It's a Declaration of Independence. And a lot of people have told me that. Mr. Harvey, if you're upstairs, yeah, I've asked that question because I came up with, in the course of human events, and a lot of people say, oh, it's the Constitution. Really? Now, Mr. Harvey, you did a special way back in the 1970s, I believe, about this. And you put it down, and most people probably don't even remember or even heard of this. It was ratified on July 4th, 1776, but it was started in June. And in that time, in Independence Hall, Philadelphia, and that's the same building where you had the Constitution a few years later, say like, 13 years later or so, 1789. But here in 1776, this is the First Continental Congress. And then I go into the Second Continental Congress. And the Second Continental Congress is the one that finally approved this document. And President Biden, you perk your ears up because this is your problem that you got today. The people who signed this declaration were 56 people, representing your 13 colonies. And there was no Joe Blow in there. Or as you would say, riff-raff, or a penniless guy. These guys were all wealthy and well-to-do men. Now, mind you, all through history, after the American Revolution, every revolution around has been started by the riffraff and the Joe Blows, who had nothing, okay? Therefore could lose nothing. The American Revolution is an example of the other way. And this is what they don't tell you, American people, when they teach you this. Because in my country, in Panama, when you had the so-called revolution, which, by the way, was staged by the Americans, because they controlled Colombia, and they made sure Colombian troops never bothered to do anything. So it was an interference by Americans, but be that as it may. The guys who started that were riffraff. Manuel Amador Guerrero was a guy of notoriety, but he had nothing compared to the other colonials at the time in Panama from Colombia. This was riffraff. Same with all other countries and whatever nation you do that started this. Over in France in 1789, it was riffraff who started this. But the American Revolution of 1776, the people who signed the 56 signees of the Declaration of Independence, they had a lot to lose. They shouldn't have been there. And this is what Mr. Paul Harvey tried to instill in you Americans. These were people that had nothing to gain and everything to lose. And a lot of them did. Most of them lost their lives, and most of them lost their fortunes on this war. If you look at all the Declaration of Independence signees, especially here in Georgia, there's a county name for one of the guys, Button Gwinnett. He lost a lot, okay? Even his life, because it cost him his life in 1777. A few of the signees there, because you were signees, and not just John Hancock, but King George III, wanted everybody of them caught and hung. And there was a few of those 59 or 56 signees that were hung, and their properties confiscated and burned to the ground by the British. Some of them were tortured. Some of them lost more than they thought. Their families, too. Because not only them, but their families, the British killed. And you're thinking of, oh, yeah, the Adams family got, and I don't mean Mr. Gomez Adams, I mean John Adams. Samuel Adams lost a lot, his cousin. John Hancock, he was never the same. Patrick Henry, he was never the same. Even Paul Revere lost a lot. George Washington didn't have a lot to lose because Mount Vernon was his brother Lawrence's. He inherited Mount Vernon. But the British never got to him. But they sure got to Henry Lee, who was the father of Robert E. Lee, and he lost a pretty penny there. This is what Mr. Harvey was trying to tell you when he made We the People of the United States. And the people who started this war, who signed the Declaration of Independence, they weren't Joe Blows. They were people that had a lot to lose, and most of them lost it all, including their lives. It's the only country in the world where this has happened. Yet I don't see this being taught in any American schools. And President Biden, we gotta stick it to the wealthy, because they have done nothing for America but patent their packets. Really? Mr. Biden? You sound like Benedict Arnold to me on that respect. Because this Declaration of Independence started with people that had a lot to lose. They didn't have to do this because they could have been very much pampered by the British around their holdings. They wanted to create something different, a world different. Unfortunately, their dream never made it through, because here we are today, 240 some years later, actually 245 years later almost, and they haven't learned anything. Your descendants haven't learned anything. Mr. Harvey was trying to instill that to them when he said this. And he did a program that lasted almost half an hour on this. And you people never bothered to get on your brains because you got watermelons for brains. Like I told you, this country is the only country that I can ever find where you had people put their names on there and know that if that gets to the opposition like George III, he wanted their heads. And literally their heads is what he wanted. And he got some. Because some of them were tortured to death, some of them were shot, and some of them burned on their own properties as the British burned everything to the ground. None of the 56 signees came out of that war escaped with scot-free. Even Patrick Henry, and then who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." Or John Hancock, who really signed that thing with the big letters that you see on the signature. That's the only signature you can determine. He forever was changed after that signature because he had to run for his life for 8 years. And that's what he did. He ran for his life for 8 years. So you see, President Biden, now that you're taxing the hell out of the wealthy because they are the ones responsible for our mess here. Your ancestors, the wealthy ones, is the one that started this revolution by signing the Declaration of Independence. So, Mr. Biden, your argument against the wealthy is null and void. But who's going to pay the taxes? And just like the Revolutionary War, they paid dearly, along with the riffraff who joined the party. But over here, because of the way that you guys have this country set up now, 245 years later, the riffraff is going to pay the price. Because what are you going to do? You're going to have to start taxing people on the roads, either through mileage. You got to report mileage on the 1040 and tax them at what? 1 cent, 2 cent, 3 cent, 4 cent, 5 cent? Yeah. And then you're going to have to tax them on what? How many times did you go to the bathroom? Okay, that's 1 cent every time you go for 365 days. I'm pretty sure you're going to do that, President Biden, right? And this is what the British were starting to do. So you're back to 1776 square one again, Americans. And you call that the 16th Amendment to the Constitution. Tax the hell out of me, I don't care. And that's what that amendment means. And that's what Mr. Harvey was trying to point out to you. You're the only country in the world, when he wrote "We the People," that taxed the hell out of yourselves. And you did it willingly. Most countries, most people in the world don't want the government to tax you like you guys do here. Boy, ain't that something? And the 16th Amendment gives you right thing. They can even tax you. You own no property here. You own nothing. It's eminent domain. Weren't that why you were fighting the British back in 1776? And this is what Mr. Paul Harvey was trying to tell you. And we the people. So, Mr. Harvey, I'm trying to set this generation up. Will they ever look you up in the "We the People"? I'm not sure. But they should. Because that's what "We the People" meant. It's not the Constitution. It's the Declaration of Independence, which you guys don't even know a single word about it. Or the 56 members that signed it, who lost everything for the most part. Maybe 9 of them didn't, but the rest did. Even their lives. Some got caught by the British and hung. Others got tortured to death. And others were penniless, with rags. That's all they had at the end. They were the riffraff. Anyway, this is your favorite alien and Bubba, sitting in for Paul Harvey this afternoon. And now, you know the rest of the story. Good day.